So I'm thrilled today to be able to introduce Sheila Chrobak, who I feel like is a bit of a rock star behind the scenes with Becker's. She comes to us with such a rich history of professional work, but honestly, what's special in our hearts is she is such a strong play advocate and a practitioner of play. And Sheila takes pride in her unique approach to speech language therapy services and in recognizing the influence of the whole child on their progress within sessions. So again, she's worked over 25 years in the field with a variety of pediatric clinicians, as well as supporting graduate and undergraduate students, writing articles and presenting at conferences. So without further ado, welcome, Sheila.
Thank you. All right. Before we dive in, can you hear me okay? Can I get
Yes.
okay, great. Just making sure. Thank you to the team at Becker's for having me. And thank you to everybody who has come to join us today on this webinar to be able to engage in this conversation about the intersection between regulation and communication. Erin, I so appreciate that mindfulness moment. It really was super helpful. It felt great. And I appreciate that you took the lead on that for all of us. When you were asking for numbers, I think that the highest number I saw come in was 25. Which is probably a testament to how many people are feeling along the way. And then I saw those numbers drop really nicely. So that was beautiful. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to tap into some regulation tools for myself as we communicate through our webinar today. So just in reinforcing what Erin brought to the table, as we take a look at our plan for the day on our next slide, I want everybody to just take a moment to check in on their own regulation. So think about what's happening in your environment, your space. Check in on where you're sitting, what's happening away from your body, what's happening close to your body. How are you feeling physically? How are you feeling emotionally? And is there anything that you need to help yourself feel at your very best to participate in the next, I don't know, about 45 minutes as we dive into this topic? Grab what you need now. Let me just share with you what I needed before I started this webinar. I set up my space early. And then I went outside for a walk, which was really great. It's a beautiful day here in Charlottesville, Virginia. So I went for a little bit of a walk and did some breath work. I used the restroom. I grabbed my favorite water bottle to have close by. I grabbed paper and a pencil to have close by in case I need to jot anything down. I grabbed myself a quiet fidget. And then I have some other tools going, including a timer going to help me stay on track. So anything you need, now is your chance to grab it. And today our plan is to dive into some definitions of regulation and communication, how we're using those today in our talk. We'll talk about how regulation and communication are super important as we move throughout our day. And then, of course, we'll talk about supports and strategies to embed into the day. So on this next slide, you are going to see our definition of regulation. And let me just say that this term regulation is huge. It's just enormous. So at a really fundamental and functional level, this definition that's on the screen, regulation is our ability to manage and adjust our emotions, our thoughts, and our behaviors in response to different situations. That is at the fundamental level what regulation is. It's our ability to act in a way that's appropriate for a given situation. But if you stop and think about that for a minute, you realize that that is really broad and kind of ambiguous, because who's deciding what's appropriate in any given moment? And how do we inherently just know those expectations, right? What are we using as clues to know those expectations? And also remembering that we all have different nervous systems and thresholds. So those regulation ideas of what's appropriate in any given moment are going to be shifting. When we are regulated, our nervous system is in balance. Our ability to physically, emotionally, and cognitively respond to stimuli is intact. And that's both external stimuli and internal stimuli. Essentially, it means that our parasympathetic system, the part of our nervous system that's responsible for rest and digest, and our sympathetic system, the part that's responsible for fight, flight, and freeze, are in balance. And so, of course, the opposite of that would be dysregulation. And we aren't always just one or the other. We aren't always just fully regulated or fully dysregulated. There is a big range here. There's a lot of movement. Lots of us are on the threshold for portions of our day where any little thing might tip us into dysregulation. So I just want you to be thoughtful about that as we go into this conversation. There's also a progression of development of regulation, but then for all of us, we shift between having others support our regulation, co-regulating with others, and self-regulating. And that's happening for us as adults, as well as for our students. So take a moment to just think about how we support ourselves as adults, the people participating in today's webinar. We get to decide what we're going to wear to feel comfortable, what we're going to eat and drink, and when we're going to eat and drink it, when we're going to stand up and stretch or go outside, how often we're going to sigh or take a deep breath or do a mindfulness moment, when we're going to reach out to a friend for support, when we're going to fidget with our pen, when we're going to take a nap. Sometimes we rely on others. We're pulling from the energy of other people, or we're drawing a big hug from them to help us regulate. And every once in a while, and this includes all of us adults, we are hoping that someone else is going to make a big decision for us or do something to help us regulate because we are just done for the day. And all of that to say that we as adults have the autonomy to access and utilize these strategies all day, every day. But typically our students don't. In order to support our regulation, we need to know those key systems that help us regulate. So we have our sensory regulation. That is how we responding to external and internal stimuli that is impactful to us. We have cognitive regulation, so our ability to attend and focus, our ability to inhibit responses, to follow directions, to problem solve, and so much more. And we have our emotional regulation. How do we manage frustration, fear, anxiety, surprise, excitement? And how do we modulate our outward responses to those emotions, right? Those are all really big things. And it is super important for us as the adults to know our regulation needs in order to be able to support those around us. As we move to the next slide, I want to be super clear because this is something that I hear a lot, and I want to be clear, and clearly my social media algorithm was fully aware of what I was working on recently. Regulation is not equivalent to calm. All right, those are not the same things. Regulation is adjusting the volume of our voice in the library versus on the playground. It is focusing on the math lesson the teacher is demonstrating. It's responding with compassion to our friends when they are hurt or upset. It's playing safely with wooden blocks. So when I speak to families and students about regulation, I like to use the phrase, are your body and brain feeling in control and ready to do the task at hand? So my catchphrase is in control, not calm down. Our ultimate goal throughout the day is to maintain regulation. I recently saw somewhere that a clinician, a speech language pathologist, was questioning whether regulation and working on regulation and supporting regulation was in their scope of practice. And let me just say this, regulation is in the scope of all of our practice. Regulation for ourselves and regulation for our students is essential. We all need to be working on this in order for everyone to have a successful day, in order for everyone to communicate and to learn. So regulation is in the scope of practice of everyone working with students. We could talk about regulation for hours. We don't have the time for that. So let me just end this section on regulation by saying we just need to agree that we all have different nervous systems. We all have different thresholds. We all have different ideas about what's appropriate or inappropriate in a given situation. And these are all moving targets for ourselves and for our students. And I just want to build that foundation as we move into the rest of our webinar. All right, so let's talk about communication. Communication is essentially our ability to attend to, process, respond to information, and to express our thoughts with others. It includes our ability to send and receive information. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the exchange of information. We communicate verbally, related to words, and non-verbally, so not with the use of words. And both are important in our daily interaction. I loved that, Erin, that you alluded to this at the front end. What kind of communication, what kind of nonverbal communication do we use? It's really super important. Communication can occur through a variety of modalities. So we have spoken word, reading and writing, gestures like pointing or formal signs like ASL, body language, facial expressions, eyebrow shifts, and visual representations in the form of photos, symbols, and pictures. And that means that communication disorders can also exist across all of those areas. As we move to our next slide, I want to share this quick video that exemplifies the complexities of communication. So first, I want to say to everybody participating, I do not use videos or photos of children's faces. So you're not going to see anybody's face today in a video, but I do have a number of clips to share with you. But I actually think in this video, it makes it more powerful. This is a 3-year-old student that I work with, and he is seemingly well-regulated. He's feeling very comfortable and excited about the activity we're doing. He's engaged. And this video is going to share with you just how complex communication is. So Christine, you can go ahead and play this one. All right, did everyone have the audio on that? I did not. No, we did not. Oh, well, that's not going to be a very good example of communication that I'm trying. Okay, there was no audio on that.
We got you, Sheila. Christine just has to reshare and do the enable sound button on the
Okay. All right, look at this.
Share button.
You all were probably thinking, wow, this is quite the example of communication. All right, let's try that one again. All right, still no audio. We'll try it one more time. I hope we can get audio because these videos I feel like are really, really helpful. While Christine is loading up the audio, let me just share a little bit. You're going to see a slide after the video where it lists a partial list of all the things. Here it comes up that go into communication. All right, let's try this one more time. There we go.
I like the way you slid it in. Big crunch. Yes. And shake it out.
Hey, no more ready!
Oh no! What happened to the point?
Where am I going to do?
Your Valentine is looking.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys for working on that over on the Becker side of things. So You can probably guess why this student is in my office. If you didn't notice, not only were there concerns with his speech sound production skills and his intelligibility, but you can also hear how his pitch rises and is very high pitched. And you can also hear his rate of speech. And so there are a lot of factors, a lot of components that go into speech. So if you flip to the next slide, Christine, whoops. Nobody panic when you see this next slide, right there. All right. When you see this slide, this is not an all-inclusive list, but, and you guys don't need to know this, so don't panic, don't start writing these words down. This is simply to show you how complex communication is, all right? It takes an extraordinary amount of coordination, of respiration, of articulation, of timing, of closing off our velopharyngeal flap so that the air comes through our mouth when it's supposed to and our nose when it's supposed to. We have to use all of those nonverbal cues that we're receiving. We need to repair communication breakdowns, but how do we know there's been a communication breakdown? So without going through this entire list, you get the point. It is extremely complex, and all of these things have to be coordinated very closely. So you could imagine that under the best of circumstances, it's challenging to communicate with our spoken language or with other modalities of language. And of course, if there are any challenges at all in our communication, these areas are further impacted. So let's quickly look at what a speech language pathologist does. All right, a speech language pathologist, that's my role, is here to, number one, support everybody that we can with communication challenges. But to break it down, we assess and treat communication disorders, including speech and articulation, receptive language, expressive language, fluency, voice, social pragmatic language disorders, phonological and phonemic awareness skills, executive function difficulties. We also assess and treat for feeding and swallowing disorders. A big role for speech language pathologists is often to collaborate and coordinate the care of an individual's full support team. So that includes parents, caregivers, teachers, the pediatrician, neurologist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, anybody that is working with a student. And collaboration is I believe, a huge part of what teams need to be doing in order to support students and their families. Also, we work with individuals with a variety of diagnoses, and often these diagnoses are complex and multisensory in nature. So autism spectrum and neurodiverse profiles, childhood apraxia of speech, attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, auditory processing disorders, social communication disorders, fluency disorders, traumatic brain injury, all fall under the types of students that we might be working with. I say students, there are adult speech language pathologists as well. And you're going to find speech language pathologists working in early intervention programs, in schools, hospitals, inpatient and outpatient settings, and private practice. Okay, I kind of flew through that last part because I want to make sure we get to our the even meatier parts of regulation and communication in real life. But I want to pause for a second here and find out if there are any questions in relation to our definitions of regulation, communication, or the role of a speech language pathologist. Anything that I can field at this point. All right, are we good? Great, we're feeling a thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, good. I feel like I've done a good job communicating about these areas with all of you. So thank you for paying attention to what those definitions are for the purposes of today. All right, so let's talk about regulation and communication in real life, every day, all day. All right. So all of us have experienced in some form or another when someone is dysregulated. So again, I'm going to use my words, not feeling in control of their body or their brain, and they're struggling to participate in communication interactions. On a daily basis, these are some of the communication skills that we need every day. We need to be able to make transitions, follow directions, answer questions, express our wants and needs, retell experiences, participate in conversation, participate in academic lessons, and many more things that happen throughout the day. All right. So you can imagine that experiencing dysregulation is highly disruptive for the student and for those around them. All right, now I'm going to give you a list of, it's not an exhaustive list, of what we need to be able to have to communicate and learn efficiently and effectively. All right. We need to feel comfortable in our body. If we're uncomfortable, and that's what our brains are focusing on, then we don't have the bandwidth to do anything else, to communicate and learn. That leads to, we need brain space to communicate and learn. So if the sensory stimuli that we are experiencing, either externally or internally, is taking up our brain space, it is impossible for us to be attending to the information we need to be focused on. We need to have an inhibitory response and impulse control so that we can stop and wait, attend to the most important information being presented, allow for time to process incoming information, and take time to formulate a response that makes sense in the situation. We have to have mental flexibility to adjust our actions and responses based on what's happening in the moment, and also to shift. We talked about this in the front end, that things are shifting all the time. So we need to be able to shift with the environment and our communication partner. We need to have attention. We need to be able to focus on the most relevant information and filter out distractions. We need to have an emotional vocabulary that allows us to express our feelings appropriately and clearly and efficiently and effectively. And we need to be able to emotionally modulate our responses to situations. So being able to adjust what our response is in order to interact with the environment and our communication partner. And all of these areas overall impact attention and executive function control. On top of all of that, these skills that we need, all the skills that I just listed, are hard to communicate around. Even as adults, we do not always have the right vocabulary and language to express what we're experiencing in a given situation, or to even parse out what area of regulation is being challenged for us. Creating space for our students to express their regulation needs or to model our own regulation needs takes time and energy. And we tend to be very goal-driven, and we're always trying to get to our expected outcome. We don't always allow for that time and space. But I feel like if I could see all of you, you would all be nodding this way when I say that we all can agree that it is impossible to learn or grow or develop skills or communicate when we are dysregulated. So we need to find the right balance. We need to be proactive. So we're going to watch a video on our next slide. And this is a video of a preschool student that I work with. She is seeing me for speech language therapy to help out with her attention and processing of auditory information. We're working on things like prepositional concepts. We're supporting her ability to integrate visual and verbal information so that she can learn in the environment that she's in. And we're also beginning to build her self-awareness of her sensory needs and establish her vocabulary and language to support her body awareness so that she can start to advocate for herself. She is a sensory misser or a sensory bystander, so she needs a lot of input, but she doesn't always realize how to support that in herself, and her peers don't always appreciate the level of force or volume or speed with which she is functioning in the classroom. She's working with an occupational therapist, and we collaborate very closely on how to support her sensory profile. So we're going to watch this video, and you're going to see a lot of different things happen to support her. All right,
we're going to get our bodies and our brains ready for our big work. So let's read our book and let our bodies move around. This book is called Red Sled. Red Sled. Let's see what happens in this book. Scrunch, 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 scrunch. Oh! Did you see what happened? He's walking through the snow with his red sled. He put his sled outside his house. Uh-oh. Huh? Bear is curious about the sled. Will you go get Bear off the window, please? We need Bear. Do you remember where you put him? Bear. Oh, I see him. Let's go get Bear off the window. Yeah. Climbing up and bringing Bear. Bring him over here. Bear. Thank you. Bear is curious about the sled. Let's be bears with our bodies. Hands down, feet down, knees up.
All right, so you can see in that video that I am proactively integrating her sensory regulation and executive function needs into our activity so that she can maintain her regulation for the teachable moments within the context of this storybook reading that we're doing. I used movement and I gave her permission to move. At the end, you see me relying on lots of deep proprioceptive. So she's climbing up and down. You can't see this part, but she's climbing up and down off of a window bench to get the item that she hid prior to starting this book. We're doing downward dog. So we're getting deep proprioceptive input into her joints. We're growling. So I'm giving her internal deep proprioceptive. We're also inverting our head, which is a great vestibular movement for her. You can hear that I shifted my intonation and my pitch to grab her attention. I use some rhythmical aspects. And what you can't see is that I'm using nonverbal cues for her to guide her to the book, but then also to guide her to where she had put the bear to begin with. And then we continue this story. We had put all the animals from the story all around the room. And so in between each page that I'm reading, she's moving and she's coming back and getting a yoga pose that helps to give her that kind of feedback. So we see a variety of behaviors in our students that help us understand their individual regulation needs, So we are using their clues to help us proactively know what we can incorporate into, for me, a session or into a classroom environment or into their home environment. We might see them moving a lot. Right? That's a really common way that students are regulating themselves. They're choosing to stand instead of sit. They're rocking in their chairs. They're adjusting their seated position. I see lots of students walking around in circles. They do big circles as they're expressing themselves. We might see them fidgeting with items in their hands for tactile or movement input. We might notice students chewing or sucking on items or requesting water bottles or snacks. We might hear them humming or covering their ears. They might request that the lights be turned off, or they may do it themselves. And if we stop and think about these things that students are doing, we can often find that they link to a sensory system. They might be part of their vestibular system or proprioceptive system or oral motor system that they're trying to activate. We might see students use strategies like asking for repetition or waiting for someone else to initiate an activity or always wanting to be in control of a situation or avoiding turn-taking type aspects of an interaction. And so we can assume that they're having some executive function difficulties. Christine, you don't need to forward from here. I'm just reviewing how we might see these things. You may see students experiencing big emotional swings as they're working out how to modulate for the activities and their response. You may see them getting physical because they don't yet have the vocabulary or executive functions. And our job is to use those clues and be really great detectives and figure out how we can support them in the classroom. So I want to pause here and see if there are any questions. Our next section, our final section of today's webinar, is about the tools and the strategies and how we can proactively integrate those in. And that's what this first slide about communication tools is. But before we move to that, any questions about what we've covered so far that I can field? Christine, you are muted, I believe.
I will share what has popped up in our chat, but I'm thinking these might be kind of great wrap up as we
Okay.
thing, but just so you know what's coming, we have questions about, are we seeing more speech communication cases lately, and how many are in Jones class, and if ADD affects speech and communication, and then the process for referring out for SLP services. So just, we'll come back to those towards the end, but just so you know, those have been shared.
Okay, awesome. You know what, before we come back to this, because some of these go to the top topic, let me just share the referral one, because that's a quick one. So depending on where you're referring a student, that depends on what kind of process you need to go through. So for example, I'm a private practice. I don't bill insurance directly. So I don't need, a parent can just self-refer themselves here. If a student is going to a location that does require a referral, then they would talk to their pediatrician about getting a referral to that place. And while I wish I could say that it was consistent across locations and states, even within the county that I live in, it is different at each individual school, at each individual early intervention program. So what I would say is, if you are concerned about a child's communication skills, I would share concretely what your concerns are and how it's impactful, and ask your the family to discuss it with their pediatrician, who can then make a referral and probably has a list of places, including whether they would qualify for early intervention in your state. I hope that answers that question. But being as clear and concrete about what you're seeing and how it's impactful is super helpful.
That's great. A follow-up question was, how do you talk to parents if they're hesitant or not on the same page about these concerns? So I feel like you just really highlighted clear, really specific examples of how that's affecting the child's experience.
Yeah. And I think what I would say is that everybody has to do that in their own time. I will say that I am very aware that when you are a early childhood educator, you are at the forefront of being the one sharing this information with a family. And I'm also aware that that has to be done delicately. I also have to do that when I'm sharing with families if I think there might be more to a presentation that I'm seeing. And I gauge, based on parents' feedback, how much information I'm sharing in one given moment. I'm going to share all the information with them, but I might want to break it apart. Some families prefer it in writing. Some parents prefer a phone call. Some parents prefer to have a face-to-face. So I'm really adjusting based on everyone's needs, and including the parts that I feel that they're able to hear and act on, is super helpful. And also, I'm aware that that is extremely challenging and it can be hard to be the first person to mention that. It turns out that I would say that more families are thankful, even if it turns out that they go and get an assessment and they don't need it, right? They're thankful to have a proactive member of their students' team. And I would also say the one other thing I would add to that is that I will often speak with schools. And the first thing that teachers often say is, we don't compare children in our school program. And I appreciate and validate I see the value in that approach. And simultaneously, it is important for us to know what developmental milestones students are and are not hitting, because things build. One thing builds upon another. And so informing families early so that they can start the process has a huge value, even if it is hard for you and hard for them to hear. Okay. All right, we'll follow up on the other questions. You can hold those other questions for us. All right, so let's dive into some really practical strategies. Up on your screen, you can see that we have communication tools. Now, let me just say, there are a ton of tools to support regulation and social emotional well-being in classrooms. Tons. There are mindfulness techniques, yoga programs, breathing exercises, guided imagery, social emotional learning programs. There are environmental arrangements like the cozy corner or tents or tunnels. There's the alert program, the zones of regulation program. There are a lot of tools out there to access. But I want to talk about the very specific areas that I think we can be proactively incorporating into every day. So remember that our goal is to proactively support regulation across all areas, sensory, cognitive, and emotional, so that everyone's moving through the day as easily as possible. I am well aware that that does not always happen and individuals become dysregulated, but our big goal is how do we work towards being regulated as much of the time as possible. So let's start with our communication tools. Visuals, 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 visuals. If you haven't heard this, now you have. This is a huge communication tool that I encourage everyone to consider having options for. Visuals are permanent. They don't have a tone or an attitude. They're just there. They support our transitions. They reduce anxiety, and they support language processing. So having visuals around is super supportive. I never go anywhere without a whiteboard so that I can quickly draw a visual if I need to, if I don't have something prepped already, so that I can support what I've said, and then I can reduce my talking, and students can rely on that. We want to be clear and direct. We want to be concrete about what we are seeing and hearing. We want to provide language and vocabulary about what your observation might mean. And we want to provide a supporter tool or option around that specific observation. So I'm going to give you an example that I use a lot in my sessions. I see that you are chewing on your t-shirt, and I'm wondering if that means you need something in your mouth to feel organized. Feel free to grab your water bottle or a snack or something from the mouth bin. All right, so I've identified the action, the behavior, the outward behavior that I'm noticing. I'm labeling what it might mean for that student. I'm giving them some vocabulary around it. And then I'm giving them some other options. I'm not telling them they have to take that option. I'm not telling them that they are disorganized. I'm just providing that input, just like we do with young children, where we are walking outside, they point at a plane and we say, oh, look, it's a plane. Planes fly in the sky. Right? We're doing the same thing, but we're doing it around the behaviors that we're noticing. We want to provide language and vocabulary every time. And kids are smart. Feel free to use appropriate regulation language, right? I talk to kids about feeling comfortable versus uncomfortable, having brain space, having attention and focus, modulation and what that means, inhibitory responses and what that means. So feel free to use those words. Model self-regulation language in your own experiences, right? That is so validating for students. I am feeling distracted because my stomach is rumbling. I think I need a snack. I'm going to grab something crunchy and then come back to this activity, right? They're hearing our language and they're feeling validated and they're understanding what their end goal is. And then this last one is huge and something that we often miss as adults, which is that we need to pause and leave more space for a response. All right. We are very fast paced and outcome based, and we often don't leave enough time for students to process the input that we've given them, to make a decision, and to act upon that. So I feel like I'm not doing that here because I'm trying to get through lots of information, but pausing and leaving more space for a response, sometimes to the point where you're feeling a little uncomfortable with the pause, is okay. All right, let's flip it. Let's go to our sensory tools. I want to make sure that I'm leaving space at the end for everyone for questions. And there's also a video I want to make sure we get to. And oh, there's bubbles coming up on this. All right, I love it. All right, so these are our sensory systems. You all are very familiar with these, I'm sure. Do you see that proprioception and oral motor sensory are highlighted? They're in bold here. And that's because these are our go-to senses when we maybe don't have a really great idea about a student's sensory profile. I shouldn't say all of us, most of us benefit from deep proprioceptive input. That's input to our joints and muscles, like big, deep hugs, sitting in a beanbag chair and getting it wrapped around you, weighted blankets, chewing on something to give us input into our jaw. And we also benefit from oral motor and sensory input. So sucking, blowing, chewing, it resets our respiration and again gives us that big proprioceptive input. So if I don't know a student well, or I don't have a strong sense of their sensory profile, I am always going to go to deep proprioceptive and or oral motor and sensory to support them. And these are things we can integrate throughout the day, right? You can have bouncy bands on your chair, beanbag seating, some yoga poses or a yoga station. You can use quiet whistles or have something that they can suck up with a straw and move, allow them to have water bottles or a snack available to them. And then, of course, we have our other systems. We want to be attending to making sure that students get enough movement through space and balance opportunities. So swinging, sliding, rocking, walking on a balance beam. You can use those during transitions as well. Those are great vestibular tools. We need to think about visual information. Is the lighting too high? Is it calming? Do you have some tools around the room that students might want to go to? I always have this one out that they might want to go to help them feel centered and grounded. And then, of course, we want our visual stimuli like our whiteboard or visual timers or visual schedule. We want to be thoughtful about the auditory input happening and also have tools available. Do you need to have some sets of noise canceling headphones in the room? Do you want some background music playing? Are students paying attention to noises because their auditory processing system is pulling everything in at the same volume? So do you need to do something else to draw their attention to the most important piece? We want them to have tactile and touch opportunities. And we want them to have opportunities with smell, which can be super calming or super energizing. And also is tightly connected to our memory system. So often no smells is the way to go. And then, of course, we have our interoceptive system. If someone needs to use the bathroom, or they're really hungry or really thirsty or really hot or really cold, or really tired, those things are going to all be impactful. So we want to be thoughtful about those and allow access to those tools. All right, let's jump to our cognitive supports. Okay. Oh, so sorry. I forgot. You know what? I'm going to skip this slide. And we can go back to it if we want at the end. But that slide is just sharing how I'm checking in with a student and using my language around how does your body and brain feel, and are you ready for an activity? All right, so we talked about communication tools. We've talked about sensory regulation tools. We also have our cognitive regulation tools, things that we can be practicing every day. These primarily are our executive functions. Do we have an inhibitory response? Are we playing games like freeze dancing, stop and go activities, red light, green light? Are we addressing working memory to help with following directions and transitions and other areas? So memory games, what's missing games, and story retells. Are we practicing turn taking and what that feels like and the time that can take? I always love to start with collaborative games because that often feels the best for all students and gives us lots of practice. We need to think about time management. Are we allowing students to understand the difference between a short amount of time and a long amount of time and what the expected outcome is? That's something that we can actually practice. We need to think about how we're bringing their focus and attention to tasks. So using our intonation, volume, prosody, rhythm, sometimes a quick shift in an activity can help bring someone back in, draw them back in, and practicing sustained attention. And then we need to think about problem solving and mental flexibility, using materials like the game Canoodle or Tangrams or any kind of activity where we get to layer in, our plan didn't work, we have to change something. All of these areas of play and support are going to help with executive function skill building. All right, and then we get to our emotional regulation tools. And this is tricky because we are working to not tell students what they're feeling per se, or how big or small their reaction may feel internally, but we are working to help them learn about modulation of emotions. So we want to practice that. We want to practice modulation. You can see these charts that I have up where I work with students on external modulation, how fast or slow, how loud or quiet, how much force we're using. And then we can translate that to emotional modulation. We're not always devastated or always ecstatic. There's a lot of range in there. We want to build a proactive plan for big emotional responses. So we want to actually plan ahead for a big emotional response and practice it. We want to make a plan around anxiety. So when a student mentions something that is taking up brain space, what tools can we use to kind of take that off of their mind? I keep a notepad and I tell them I'm writing it down and we'll come back to it. Or I let them see me putting a note into my computer that I'm going to bring a certain activity next the following week. Or I pull the item that they're excited about out and I put it next to me so that they can see that I haven't forgotten and that I'm validating what they're hearing. And then our real biggie is that when we are watching a student sort of start to go into an emotional space that feels like it's going to be big, we know that they're going to likely drop into that lower brain. And we need to do our best to pull them out of that, right? We need to climb back up to our cognitive brain. So when I start to hear hints of a student feeling some big emotions, this is the time that I might layer in a quick math or problem solver or some sort of puzzle that they can do. Or for some students, it might be a reading activity, something that's going to pull them back up. Not different than what we are told as adults we need to do when we're feeling overwhelmed. So let's watch this video. I'm working with this student. We are getting ready to play a game and he has a tough time losing. And so you're going to hear what we do.
If you lose, what are you doing today if you lose? Give me a plan.
I do this.
Okay. If I lose today, I like this plan that you have. If I lose today, I'm going to do this. Good game. Good game. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, so we both have a different plan for what's going to happen if we lose. Are you going to lose some of these? Probably, right? Am I going to lose some of these? Probably. All right, green or blue? Are you green or blue?
I'll be the blue.
All right, I will be the green. Would you like to be in charge of putting the cards in?
All right, so you can see I really front loaded that activity and then also offered choices as we were getting ready to start so that he would feel some sense of control. I believe that one of the greatest gifts that we can provide for children is for us to teach them about their nervous system and regulation, to give them the language and vocabulary and tools so that they can also support themselves throughout the day. So our final piece of the puzzle is that we want students we want to share all of this information with the team. So up on your screen, you can see an email that I recently received. It says, I thought it would be smart to send an email about P's high energy state prior to arrival. He's had no therapy this week and is a little bonkers, but in his typical super happy kind of way. However, it might take us extra time to settle into an activity. I think he's going to be so thrilled to get on your swing. Just a heads up. So for me, this is one of the biggest wins. I'm working with a student who struggles with regulation. And in the process of working with this student, I've helped the parent understand that we can't get to a more concrete target around his communication skills when he's dysregulated. We have to put a priority on regulation. And she is recognizing that we are going to need to do that in this upcoming session. She's prepping me to know what I might need to have ready. So I've prepped, this is an audio that we listened to, Gravitational Grape. I've got his swing ready to go and I've got a mouth box ready for him. And this is just a huge win. We need to be sharing the strategies, the supports, the language with the team members, parents, occupational therapists, physical therapists, teachers, everybody, so that we can all be practicing this. And believe it or not, you're going to start to recognize in yourself and in your parents that you work with and in your teammates, you're going to start to recognize about their regulation needs as well. And they're going to start to recognize it, which is going to be super helpful. All right, I really want to watch this last video, but before I do, I'm just going to say this really quickly. I know that I have the luxury and the time and one-on-one situations to work with students in a very flexible way. I'm very aware of that. And I know that many of you that joined today don't have that same luxury and time. You're working with a classroom of students. Please do not go this alone. All right. Enlist the help of your team members, enlist the help of therapists, enlist the help of other caregivers, enlist other older students. I love when a teacher asks me for visuals, because that's something I already have easy access to and probably already have prepped. So don't go it alone. When we do all of these things together, this is what an optimized session can look like when we use all of the tools. So I'm not even going to tell you about this kid. I'm just going to let you watch.
Do you remember? So we are going to do that. Absolutely, 100%. In fact, I'll leave it out right here so that I can't forget it, right? I heard your words and you are excited to use this for our game. But before we do this, we are going to create a story, you and I together. And it looks like maybe your body and brain could use something before we do our story. What could you do to make sure that your body and brain are feeling ready and in control for our story? And let me know if you need some ideas. Because I've got like 8 million of them. You know how my brain works. My body and brain has like 8 million ideas for how to help you feel ready and in control to read Red Sled. This is a brilliant idea. What your body would like to be moving while we read the story. Very clever. That's a super clever plan. Okay, so wait. We have a rocking chair.
That chair used to be right facing this way.
Yes, these chairs got shifted a little bit. I think maybe when they came in to clean up the space. But I love your idea to pick a rocking chair that will allow you to move and grow. Oh. All right, tell me how you're doing. How's that body and brain? Okay, now, I don't know if we've read this story before. Have you read this story before?
No.
Okay, there are not a lot of words in this story. So we're going to take turns adding parts to the story. All right, there are not a lot of words, and you're going to think this is very funny. Would you like me to read the whole story the way it's written first, and then we add words, or would you like to add words as we go?
Add words, actually.
Okay. Red
I don't know
Sled.
how to spell.
That's okay.
I just know how to spell my name.
Okay, we're not going to write them today. We'll just say the words today. All right, and down the road, we'll work together if we were going to spell it. Red Sled by Lita Judge. Make sure that body is feeling comfortable. Super important so that you can be attending to our book. The most important thing right now is our book. Scrunch, 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 scrunch.
All right. And so we go on successfully to do the activity, but you can hear that I'm responding to his emotional needs, his sensory needs. I'm giving him opportunities to make choices and feel in control when and where appropriate. And I'm guiding him the whole time to this end goal that we're working on. I know we're at the end, so let me just say this final word. When we prioritize regulation to support communication and learning, we are prioritizing a sense of connection and safety and validation in each of our individual experiences. So let's be honest, none of us is our best version of ourselves if we don't feel safe and connected to the environment and people around us. If we help everyone with these regulation needs, we can all move through the world with a bit more ease. And I hope that the ideas that I've set forth today spark some ideas in your classrooms or in your therapy sessions, in your schools or in your homes. And I look forward to answering any questions.
Love, love, love. Sorry, I'm trying to get off. I was like fixated on your follow-up because I also had so many questions. So a couple things first. Marilyn, if you could put the link to the evaluation in the chat, that would be super helpful. For those of you who do need to boosty, it's now 2:03. Please click on that link, fill out your evaluation, and on your submission page, you will have the link to your certificate. So this is your cue that you are now allowed to click on the survey and leave. For those who have 5 to 10 minutes, please stay with us. We are going to ask questions for Sheila. And I think, Christine, you already have some queued up. Is that correct? You're on mute.
I'm going to double check that that eval link. If someone could let us know if that works. It's coming up a little funny for me. But we had a question about a child with autism and not having a sense of that individual kiddo, but having a class full of kids, which you kind of spoke to, that like you're working one-on-one as a SLP, but teachers have many kids that they're trying to juggle all their needs at the same time. And then that's variable. Some days they're not in the mood for doing the specific thing or following the plan or instructions. Oh, great. Thanks for everybody saying about the eval. So is there anything specific? And then I think there was another one about ADD and so specific diagnoses, maybe we can generalize.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so let me, I think the question about ADD that came in earlier was around how that affects communication. So let me respond to that and then link that with the autism one as well. So I see a number of students with diagnosis of ADHD. And what we need to remember is that most of these diagnoses are very complex and not singularly housed. That's a hard word to say, singularly housed in one space. So the students that I'm working with often come through my door for something else. They're coming for maybe articulation, or they're coming for, something else that's impacting them. And then they layered onto that is the ADHD diagnosis. But I do also see students solely for the ADHD diagnosis because it impacts their executive function skills. And that is something that speech language pathologists work on. So working with students on inhibitory response and working memory and stopping and waiting and taking the time to process all of these things are areas that can be addressed in sessions. And communication is also social communication is often highly impacted by ADHD because those students are not always able to inhibit themselves long enough to attend to, process, and respond appropriately to the immediate context because they're often maybe 10 steps ahead of me in what they're thinking or planning or doing. They also have challenges with organizational skills. So when we get to levels of writing narratives or conversational interactions or storytelling, all of those areas that I've listed can be really challenging, and it's hard for them to maybe get organized and focused in to create something that other individuals are going to be able to follow. So that's a very general, broad way that I might be supporting a student with ADHD. In a classroom where you have autistic students, whether it be one or a couple, again, huge range of what that presentation might look like, and huge idea around skill set and also ability to perform skills in any given moment. And something that I didn't get to, but that is important to say, is that we're talking about regulation and communication today, but obviously there are other factors that can play a big role in how a student is responding in any given situation. They might have motor planning and coordination difficulties. They might not have the full visual field that we think that they have. So we're trying, again, to be very holistic in our approach. None of the strategies and supports that we're going to use for a specific student are going to likely be harmful in any way to your broader classroom, right? We want to think about how can we support everybody, right, in a classroom situation, and what are those supports going to look like, and how are you going to embed them into your day to support everyone and to help everyone understand the regulation. So an example might be that in your transitions, you know, if you think of transitions as being, we're going to line up and walk down the hall, maybe your transition needs to look more like, we're going to jump or skip or bear crawl, or we are going to go as any, you know, whatever. These are your choices. Here are 5 choices to safely make it from our classroom to the music room. Or you might need a transitional item to hold. So, you know, I think that thinking about integrating the strategies across all 3 areas that we discussed today, 4 areas, is going to be beneficial to everybody. I don't know if that answered the question, but hopefully somewhere in there was an answer.
That's great. So Erin updated the link in their certificate, and that should open. And if you're willing to do it again, that's great. If not, you will be emailed a certificate by the end of the week. If you registered at the email you registered with, you'll get that via email. Thanks for your patience. Sorry for that hiccup. Sheila, one thing we hear a lot from teachers is confusion. I love how you explained kind of our capacity, how it varies, and that, like, depending on our input and the things we're challenged by. What about, like, when we know, you know, yesterday this kiddo could do this task, and today, you know, we're in a meltdown because the Velcro shoe thing isn't working. How can we support and challenge, but also, like, be tuned in to what a child is needing in that moment?
That's a great question. So there is a difference between what skills we have and what skills we can perform in any given moment. And that's true for all of us.
Yeah, mic drop, pause, say it again. There's a huge difference between, and everybody lean in.
The skills that we have and the skills that we can perform in any given moment. Okay. Yes. So let me give a really concrete example of that. So, that people can really lay into what this means. If I'm working with a student who has apraxia, so apraxia meaning that they have motor planning and coordination challenges. And on Monday, they came to see me. And at the end of the session, I said, oh, we're all done. It's time to get your shoes on. And they pop over, they get their shoes and they put them on, easy peasy lemon squeezy, no big deal. Right. And then they come back the following week and I say that, and they somehow can't access that motor skill in the given moment. So I'm assessing in any given moment. Did they hear me? Did they process what I said? Are they distracted, or were they able to focus? Do they understand the vocabulary I use? Let's say all of that is in place. Let's say they go towards their shoes, right? And suddenly they can't bend down to get them, right? That would be a breakdown. And I've seen them do it. I know that they have that skill. And in this moment in time, however you want to put it, the stars are not aligned, the planets aren't aligned, whatever it may be to you, in that given moment, they might be struggling. What I try to do when I feel like I've seen a skill and then it's not appearing again, I try to layer in the language around that, right? Like, for some reason, it is hard to get your shoes on today. No worries, I'm going to help you out. And maybe that's something we'll see what happens next week, right? So I'm going to try to support what is challenging for them. I'm going to let them know I'm going to step up and help them, right? I'm not trying to create more anxiety. I'm not trying to make things harder for them. And I'm going to also try to layer in some language, right? Shoes hard today, that also validates that I know they've also been able to do it. Right. So that's true of communication. That's true of motor skills. That's true of play skills. That's true of turn taking. That's true of all kinds of things that in any given moment we can access skills, and then we might not be able to access them because of something interfering, some sensory stimuli, some difficulty with executive function in that moment, something emotional rising up in us. I always try to presume and assume that a student is doing the very best that they can in a given moment, and then layer in the communication tools and offer my assistance and support for them, right? If at the end of the day, I then realize, oh, they didn't understand that concept, or then I know that's what I need to work on as a target. I need to start to work on that as a target. But assume and presume competence and ability, and support when and where we need to. I will say the other thing that the other example I'll give is, this is like breathing. We all breathe every day, all day. When you go to the doctor and they put the stethoscope on your back and they say, take deep breaths, it becomes hard to coordinate and you get a little anxious, and that makes it even harder. We're not trying to do that for our students around us. We're trying to keep them at a level that they know that we're here to help and support them. So that would be the encouragement that I would offer.
That's awesome, Sheila. Thank you.
That was a lot of mic drops all in one summary.
Oh, well, thank you. I was going to say, oh, did that come out right?
No, addressing children, assuming positive intent that they are doing the best that they possibly can in any given moment.
Yes.
Scaffolding the communication skills that they do have, and centering safety and connection at the heart of every single interaction.
Yes.
Seems to be what I'm hearing from you are like foundational. It can apply no matter the diagnoses, no matter the challenge. These are a couple of foundational practices to support the communication skills in all children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And remember, if you've lost that for whatever reason, right, that there's an ebb and a flow and maybe you've lost it, there's always time to repair and go back. So, if you realize that the autistic student in the classroom, something interfered with them feeling that safety and that connection, right? There's plenty of time to repair that and go back and reset and bring them back into whatever it is that what we're trying to do, right?
Yes. It is never one and done, hopefully.
Right. Yes.
Only opportunity.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. When I watch those videos back, there are a number of moments where I'm like, ooh, I would have said that differently, or, ooh, I would have done that differently, or, did I wait long enough? Right. And so we're always learning and growing and figuring out what's going to support everyone.
So Sheila was brilliant in supporting this experience with this the quick reference download in terms of proactive strategies. We can think of that as the base, and then responsive strategies in the moment. So when you're looking at this later or from the landing page, this is actually a hyperlink directly to that download, as well as 2 reflection guides and then blogs to enhance your understanding of the role of SLPs in supporting early childhood educators and the children they serve, and how that work goes together. So thank you so much for supporting us and our audience with those additional resources. We do want to make sure that people know where to find you. So you do have your own website, as well as a wonderfully rich Instagram and Facebook, where you share content, and so much of it is connected to play. So I personally, as a mother and an educator, enjoy your content just because it connects to these foundational concepts and really honors the child. So we encourage our audience to find you and follow you there as well.
Thank you.
Boy, thanks for your patience and grace, those 90 of you who are still with us and realized there was a broken link. There's nothing worse than testing your tech and then realizing your test didn't even work. So we did fix it. It is there, but rest assured you will get it in your follow-up email as an attachment, even if you weren't able to access it in the evaluation link. And just to let you know, this is a part of a series that we developed to help educators identify and support regulation needs in their settings. So we started in January with self-regulation in a place-based approach. That recording is available. We then continued on into occupational therapy with Kelsey Olds. That webinar recording is available to you. Sheila's amazing webinar will be available as a recording. And then next month, we're welcoming Christian Bellissimo, a registered play therapist, to take us into how play-based strategies support children's social emotional learning. And then we're going to get super tactical in May. So please come in April. We're going to have a ton of fun in April. Actually, we're going to have some unexpected surprises there. But then in May, we're going to get into the heart of what you need, which is we see these behaviors. Help us detect what's going on. And then let's get a menu of strategies that we can use right in our classrooms. Because like you mentioned, Sheila, not everyone has access to SLPs or other support developmental therapists in their setting. So what are some strategies that we can offer to you as educators on the front lines that you can use? So that's what we're going to cover in May. So thank you, everyone. I no longer have access to my chat. Team, let me know if there's anything that I'm missing. We appreciate your patience with our technology snafus, and we hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us, guys.